morning, and welcome to the Facebook Live series from the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago called Straight Off the Bat. It's a show that covers the need to revive, survive, and adapt to the new normal of COVID-19. If this is the first time you are here, thank you for joining us. If you've been here and you're the OG and you've joined us for the last couple of sessions, you know what to do. You know the drill. I'm so excited to introduce our guest today. If you are a small business owner or you are thinking about shifting into entrepreneurship, or maybe you do have a business and you're really trying to survive what this normal looks like, you need to stick around, because as a business owner myself, I have so many questions for our guest today, and I'm excited to have you come along with it. Before we begin, make sure to smash that follow button, because this is an ongoing series that I really believe it is important for us all, you know, those who are entrepreneurs and those who are not, because financial literacy and education is beyond important. And sometimes, for some reason, talking to myself here, you know, our parents did not sit down and teach us a few things. So now is the time for us to learn something new. We're never too old to learn. And our discussion today is with Ashley, and he is someone who is going to give us some insight on how we should evolve our business. And I am going to bring him in right now. And again, if this is the first time you're joining us, what we do is we have an intro session. We talk about a few things, and the last 15 minutes, because we are going to be here for about an hour, we take your questions. And over the last couple of sessions, it's been very engaging. Thank you so much for those guys who've stuck around for it. And we're going to continue on that same vein today. So, Ashley, can you introduce yourself and what do you do?
Thank you, Pauline. Good morning. Good morning to our viewers, listeners on Facebook and other platforms. I'm so excited to be here and really appreciative of the opportunity to chat with you guys. Those of you who have read the blurb that accompanied, well, just before, obviously, the live was advertised, or when it was advertised on Facebook, you would have seen a bit of a profile on me. But just to summarize, I've been working in business support for the past 20 plus years, starting with SBDC, Small Business Development Company. This was that used to be on Charlotte Street in Port of Spain. Some of you may well have actually been clients way back then, or may actually have heard of the organization. But it's been a sort of a long career in business support, enterprise development. I am also an entrepreneur myself. I've been involved in either founding or co-founding businesses over the years in entertainment, Enterprise Hub. My current business is obviously, my current consulting firm is also a business, and so that's an entrepreneurial venture. Most recently, I launched a transit advertising business called Maxi Media Advertising, where companies are able to advertise via maxi taxis, which service over 300,000 people per day. Right, so I also consider myself to be entrepreneurial, even though I didn't all the time. You know, when I was, for example, I did do business subjects. You know, people always ask that question. I was more into sciences and languages. So even at A-levels, I did biology, chemistry, and Spanish. You know, those were the things I liked, these things I was good at. And I was just mentioning that just to be random, but I'm going to kind of weave that into the discussion later on. I'm also a director of an NGO called Caribbean Sign Language Center. You may have seen the interpreters on news, TV6 News, during press conferences during COVID or when there were hurricanes and so on. Also the budget speech and debates, parliament and so on. So the Caribbean Sign Language Center offers sign language training and the interpretation, which you would have been seeing. All right, so going even further back. You hear me, Pauline?
I am. Go ahead.
Okay, so even going further back, I mean, sometimes you need to know the backstory. Even as a child, as I said, I didn't consider myself to be entrepreneur. I didn't even know what the term was. But I grew up in Belmont in the earlier formative years. And one of the things that I was doing, for example, was creating additional gear and accessories for toy soldiers. And those of you remember, toy soldiers back then used to come just all wearing green and just plastic, and the soldiers were standing on a kind of board-looking thing. There were some trees, and that was pretty much it. So the idea was that I'd create parachutes and tents and all sorts of other gear for toy soldiers, for other children who, like me, were just bored and just wanted some extra stuff. And so I could just even my very first sale on Russell Street in Belmont as an 8-year-old, selling to a lady who was working with her son after school. Actually, she was in work gear, and creating a parachute with a toy soldier, and her reaching into her purse and selling it. So, I mean, I could even remember the thrill and the sense of fulfillment from that. So that might have been the genesis of that journey for me. Just looking at it from that perspective. But anyway, you guys must quite a few webinars especially over the past 7 months or so, and maybe on doubt and so on. So I'm going to take a different approach, and so that you're gonna obviously just eyes glaze over. Really gonna look at, as Pauline said, as how you can pivot, how you can re-energize, how you can look at your business in ways. And actually, the Bankers Association actually gonna host a series of workshops later on in the year, next year, and they will have an opportunity to dive a bit deeper into some of these topics.
Yes, so we are this is more definitely going to touch on that.
Need to remodel your business and less as the how and the what and so on, which, as I said, there'll be opportunities to do that later on. So that's me. As I said, I've been working mainly in Trinidad and Tobago, but also in the UK and elsewhere, and as I said, mainly in business support.
Okay, so just for those who are just joining us, we may have a bit of a delay because this is live, and sometimes depending on the internet connection, we have no control over that, but we're going to push forward and try to work together and answer your questions as well. And I didn't realize that you're also a Belmont person, Belmont Government Primary School alumni here. So yes, I definitely can relate to being on the streets and heading over to Charlotte Street. Nice. All right, cool. So I like the fact that you spoke. So I like the fact that you spoke about business and remodeling, and I want us to be specific today into who we're discussing and who we're talking to, because let's start off with the small business owner, because I mean, some folks are talking about all the things that, you plan for, plan A, plan B, plan C, and I've been running my business for the last decade, but there could have been nobody to foresee what the world we're living in right now, except Bill Gates, obviously. But when it comes to mapping out your business, because there's this idea of a business plan, right? And it's tricky for me because it's something that seems so overwhelming, because you're thinking it's maybe a thesis. It has to be, 50 pages long, and you have to stick by it. And where we are now, like as a business, if you had a business plan, first of all, what would be your suggestion for that person, for their business to survive now? What would be the first thing you'll tell them they have to do to be able to say, okay, this is what you need to do to continue your business and to exist?
Right, so there's a huge question. So we look at initially at a business plan, right? So as you just alluded, a business plan is pretty much passé. It's one of those things that you spend weeks on end working on, and doing a lot of research and pulling it together. You develop your business plan over time, usually with help of other people, and you come up with this document that's going to speak to where your business is now and where you intend to take the business in the next 3 to 5 years, and how you're going to accomplish that. No, not going to say that you shouldn't plan. In fact, even though we're living in a time of flux and so much fluidity, it perhaps is even more important to plan. But the idea of pulling together that weighty document that is going to really do justice to what you're about, and then also take into consideration the environment and the circumstances within which you're operating. I think to think that that's gonna be sufficient, I think is outmoded thinking. So business plans are obsolete. If you write a business plan now before you even print it, it's going to be dated, right? So the thing is that you still want to continue to plan. You still want to look ahead, perhaps with different planning horizons. I talk about micro plans where you're planning ahead for the next few weeks, the next month, because there are so many things that are going to change beyond that horizon that you're not quite sure how they're going to change. You might, as an entrepreneur, I mean, we can tend to be able to see our own corners, be able to anticipate things. We can see trends, we can read the tea leaves and so on. But what you're probably better off doing is a series of plans that you can stick together that are going to help you to actually live much more responsively, not just responsibly, but be responsive to some of those changes, some of which you may or may not have foreseen. So you're still going to plan, right? We're going to look at a tool called the Business Model Canvas in a bit, which is something that was developed over the past few years that enables you to pull together a document, and often it's just a one-pager that speaks to 9 key elements of what your business is about, the various relationships that you have internally with customers, with other stakeholders and so on, the decisions that you make, the channels through which the different touch points you will have with your customers, and so on. That gives you a lot more flexibility to adapt to change and actually to showcase what you're about to other stakeholders, let's say an investor or lender, and so on. In terms of what you need to do as SME, well, I don't want to be too prescriptive, right? Because there's a huge panoply of different types of businesses, SMEs, but even larger organizations. Maybe what can help to tease out some of those would be if I were to use a few examples. But before we dive into that, what I'll do is talk a little bit about what a business model is, right? Because sometimes people are not quite sure what the term means. I mean, you know the words, but you're not quite sure exactly. And it's just been sort of hazy. And even if you read about it in textbooks or magazines, newspapers, and so on. Right? So a business model. Yeah, go ahead.
You head into that, right? I wanted to, because I want to break this up because it could be a little overwhelming if we give too much information at once, right? But we also want to let people know out there that we do have an upcoming webinar. We will post it on Facebook. Make sure to follow that. And that is going to be headed by Ashley here with us today. And so I like the idea that you spoke about a mini plan, right? Because the idea of a business plan is outdated. You know, it's funny you say from the time you create that business plan, it's expired, especially now. And that's speaking to somebody who may be starting out from an idea. But can we talk about remodeling for a second? Because it's a term that may not necessarily be associated with businesses. It's usually, to me, I think, doing your house and remodeling your house. How is that applicable to an existing business?
Well, I like that analogy because you mentioned that we can utilize that even when you're talking about what a business model is. So if you'd envisage your house with a number of different rooms that have different functions, right, and different purposes, you can kind of extend your imagination a little bit and see your business model being something like that. If you take a panoramic view of the house plan, you can actually look at the various elements of your business model and see how they can come together in a synergistic way to give you the best chance of not just surviving, but actually succeeding, thriving, growing. So business, as I was about to say, looks at elements like your customer segments, i.e., who are you targeting? Who are these group customers, people or businesses or other organizations that you're actually targeting with your business? What is the value proposition for each of these segments, i.e., what is the value that you're creating for them? So business model is essentially how do you create value, how do you deliver that value, and how do you capture value back for your business, right? So we're looking at the value proposition. What is it that your customers really want from what you're offering? So not just the product or service, but what is the benefit they're getting from those? And what are the relationships? What is the kind of, the nature of the relationships you have with your customers? Are they Is it just totally automated where they hardly ever engage with you or interface with you at all? Or is it sort of very personal and involved so that, there's sort of one-on-one relationships with customers? I'm not saying that one is any better. You want to, courses, you want to utilize or come up with the best relationships that would enable you to derive the most value from those customers. You're also going to look at who are your key partners, those entities that are external to your business, not just suppliers, but other agencies, other stakeholders that can help you conduct some of the activities that your business needs to carry out. So that's another building block, key activities. What are those things that you need to undertake, that your business needs to undertake to continue to exist, to thrive? All of those key things, the most important things that your business needs to do. What are the resources that you have? So this will be tangible resources. There'll be intangible resources as well, like the skills, the contacts, the brand that you may have built, some sort of competency that you have that gives you that advantage. Then you're going to look at, obviously, the channels through which you provide the solution to your customers. So all businesses solve problems for customers, and your business fulfills a need. It solves a problem. It fulfills some sort of want, desire, wish, dream, fantasy of your customers. And that needs to be done ideally through the solution that you're providing. And that solution is offered to customers via a touch point, which could be a third party or directly from you. So that what are the channels? And obviously, especially now, we're going to look at cost. What's the cost structure, right? And how can you look at your fixed cost and your variable costs, and then what administration your business has. So looking at remodeling has to do with some of these things, right? So again, looking at the analogy that Pauline, or the metaphor of your house, how do you change around some of the furniture? How do you remodel the business so that it is something that's operating more optimally? Right, so you can use a number of examples. If you want, I can dive straight into those. Pauline, if you have a burning question.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to pause you for a second because I really want to talk to you about what you said about there's a problem, there's a need for your customer. That's the purpose of a business, but we're having a bit of a lag time in your audio. So what I'm going to ask you to do is see if you could jump out of the studio and come back in, because it at first it was like a second or two, but now it seems to be a bit longer. So I'm going to share some insight to the upcoming webinar while we try to work on this live situation right now. So what I want you to do is just come out, close off your browser, and come back in, right? So while Ashley does that, I want to talk to you guys about the upcoming series of events for webinars. So if you don't know what Straight Off the Bat is, it's a quarterly newsletter that comes directly from the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago. It gives insight to what's happening in the financial sector in Trinidad and Tobago. And you can head over to batt.org.tt, that's batt.org.tt. In addition to that, there is a series of events that would be coming up, and make sure to follow the Facebook page to get notified, because we will be posting the links for registration. All the events are best price, free, best price ever. And if you've not joined us before for previous events, what you can do is look at our previous live sessions. We had one with Mark Cape, which is the First Citizens Bank representation, and he spoke about a new solution, EasyBiz, which is somewhat of a grab and go version of e-commerce for your business. I definitely suggest you head over to our video section to look at that. I got very great, insightful sessions from that. And so we have posted the registration for the upcoming webinars in the link. And we also had a session about fraud a couple weeks back, actually on Republic Day, our first event. And there was such a great session with Antonio about social engineering, because a lot of folks are now shifting across to using dating apps. I know it's weird, who would have thought, but you have to be mindful of the fraud that's out there. And again, you need to go and check over on our video section in Facebook to learn more about that. So Ashley just rejoined us. Let's see if this is going to... Let's see if this is good. Let's try this again, because this is a live section, right? Okay, so you were speaking about remodeling. Yeah, let's just dive right back into it. And you spoke about, your business should, basically, there's a need for your customer, right? And although I'm a business owner, I'm also a consumer. And I would love for you to touch on what it means to actually be able to service that need, because we're now in an environment that the customer needs has changed. So you spoke about remodeling, which is a great segue into how to identify that, because I know we have tools, as you mentioned before, the Canvas tool, which would be addressed in the webinar. But if you have an existing business, for instance, and your customers' needs has changed, what process, or what advice would you give to a business owner where that is concerned? Because we are now in a world where, for instance, audio equipment is a huge thing. You're seeing this massive spike. I do some data information, and I realized Google Trends, there's a massive spike in the search for furniture. So people are looking for office furniture as well. So with that shift, what advice would you give to that business owner to make sure they want to identify that need for their customer and future customers, potential customer, that is?
Well, so that's our question. And as you said, a segue into, how do you build in or you bake in customer centricity into your business? So you want to be customer centric regardless, pandemic or no pandemic. But even now, but especially now, I should say, when things are changing so rapidly, so customers' behaviors, habits, expectations, and so on are changing and have changed over the past 7 months to quite a large degree. How do you keep on top of those changes is the question. There you can borrow from the whole lean startup movement, where they look at what's called customer validation. And customer validation has to do with how you ask questions of customers or potential customers or people that fit the profile of every customer, the customer archetypes. Ask a few questions. Have some discussions with them to ascertain exactly what the need is, right? You really want to unpack what that need is, so that you are just utilizing your own imagination and innovative capacity to come with something that you think fits the customer's needs. You really need to find out from the customers what those needs are. And some of that is quite nuanced. And so you want to avoid guessing where you can. So you come up with a hypothesis. You go to customers where possible, find out from them, not necessarily whether they would buy X or Y product. I mean, of course, you can do market research, which can sometimes be quite involved and take a lot of time and even cost a bit. But what you really want to do is go back to first principles, find out from customers exactly what their problems are. What are those pain points? How much of a pain point is each of their problems that you're trying to solve or you're proposing to solve? And how much of a priority it is for them to solve that? I mean, that's obviously for business startups before even launch or start or come up with a new product. But we find now you're effectively looking at extending product life cycles. You are looking at effectively reiterating your business. So as you remodel, you almost have a new business anyway. So it's worth borrowing those some of those techniques from the lean startup school of thought. Secondly, it's useful for you to use, and which is why I mentioned, a bit of a science background and so on before. Borrow from science, from that discipline where you experiment. I mean, there's so many things you can borrow from science that will help you treat with what you can almost say is a biological challenge that has come up that is facing the planet at this point. what you can do is come up with a hypothesis, but test those hypotheses. So you can tweak different elements of your business model. So, for example, you can come up with a new channel, or come up with new key partners, or even a different value proposition for different customer segments. And you experiment by changing things and seeing what the result is. So you come up with a hypothesis, but you test those hypotheses before you really expend a lot of time and energy and make a huge sea change with your business, and then it doesn't work. So obviously, in a time when you're pinching perhaps, you really want to, as I said, do these little experiments, take note of what you've changed, change the variables here and there, and seeing how they pan over time. And then as you go on, I mean, it sounds very incremental and repetitive, but that's the way that will advance you towards the optimum guise or optimum iteration of your business. So you can borrow from science, but also, as I said, going back to first principles, finding out from customers, not just what they want, because some customers don't know what they want. You ask them and they will tell you, okay, I want this X, Y, Z. And they're just working with what their own frame of reference is. But oftentimes, what you do is the better thing to do is to let them tell you what the problems are. And once you can really elucidate what those are from speaking to them, and as I said, not from sitting in your office or home and guessing, but finding out from them what those are. And then you create that nexus between that problem and not just a product or service, but a whole architecture, going back to your analogy there, of your business that fits the best solutions that you can offer to those customers. I can probably use a few examples. I mean, I had a client. I do some work with Kariri. Kariri has a business incubator down in Freeport. We had a client who was a participant in one of Kariri's programs a few years back. She is someone, Sherry Stevens from Claxton Bay. She was making fudge. And this is, I'm using an example that everybody can relate to, especially if you're an SME owner. She did regular fudge, milk fudge that everybody makes and sells, and she was selling from home and from the local mini mart. And she came to us and we helped her do just what I was talking about, finding out what exact problem you're solving. So currently, with a range of fudges, she was solving a couple of problems. One, glucose. People want sugar, like sugar. Your body needs sugar, actually. Your brain is a major consumer in terms of the organs in your body of glucose. You need glucose to survive. And something that's sweet is signaling to your body that, here it in glucose incoming. And then sometimes you need that bit of a sugar rush, but also there is that kind of creamy, milky mouthfeel that is very much linked to comfort, right? So those are some of the problems that you solved, a couple of problems that you solved with your regular fudge. But she was also able to ascertain that people also wanted new taste sensations, because people, especially now, you're seeing that more and more as people are home and doing their own cooking and so on. People suffer from flavor boredom, and flavor boredom is another problem that you can solve. So it's not just, okay, yes, you're getting comfort and you're getting glucose and your sugar rush and so on, and you're just feeling packaged, but something that's new and different. And so she was able to launch a range of new flavors and textures and so on, including things like pepper fudge. And she also had like chocolate and pomegranate, and a huge rum and raisin, a huge range of different, as I said, flavors, but also textures and mouthfeels and so on. And that resulted in a huge explosion in demand for her products. She didn't just do this willy-nilly. It wasn't just about new product development, but it's about understanding value propositions and how those change over time, but also how they can actually match up with new customer segments. So her products are now, have been sold through Normandy and Radisson. They have their stores at those hotels. She's been doing the rounds of the artisanal markets, but those have actually been more like a show window for her and her products. She was featured at CariFesta and is actually looking to do the next CariFesta in Antigua if it does come off. Her products have reached as far as Kazakhstan, so she's been sending me all of these amazing photos and testimonies and so on from customers around the globe. Just somebody who was making fudge in Claxton Bay, right? And just understanding how you can actually remodel, you can tweak based, and not just, as I said, the product, but also the various other rooms in that building that you can rearrange so that you are able to generate more revenue and increase your profitability. Now, because of COVID, a lot of those hotels are actually not getting as much traffic, or in fact, some of these stores are closed. And again, she's pivoting towards doing subscription boxes. Now, she's been doing extremely well, has actually been struggling to keep up with demand. And as I said, this was somebody who has a micro business, was operating out of a kitchen at home, and has been able to do extremely well going forward. That is an SME. I mean, we have other people that I've spoken to within recent time, but also over the years. I mean, there are people like, I'll just call, for example, Michael Lauchitong, who is better known as Ming. He's a keyboardist. Getting into the creative sector here, and I'm not wading into fairly deep waters here, deep and murky waters. But Ming is one of those persons who is very, very vocal, and who has been making a career in music for donkey's years. All right, but I mean, of course, now, because there aren't any live performances, and that's how most people in performing arts make their money, by having these live gigs and so on. Live meaning in-person gigs where people come and and attend an event, a concert, jazz festival, or whatever. Those haven't been happening, and he's been at pains to try to figure out new revenue models. Okay, how do you get people to pay? He was talking about what he terms virtual busking, where people sit at home or somewhere and they have an event, and they just ask people to donate. Listen here, what I'm an artist. I'm putting music out into the world, or whatever other art, and can you donate what you think you think it's worth? And so that's one model. But of course, I mean, that mightn't be very sustainable for lots of people, or for a very long time. He's also been looking at how do you engage with artists, how do you move beyond the Trinidad and Tobago market, because obviously the culture we have here in Trinidad and Tobago is one of freeness. People think people love to consume art; they don't love to pay for art. And we could have a huge other discussion around creative arts and the creative sector and so on, and respect for the art and restorative and developmental opportunities that art present. But that's for another talk. But what I'm saying is that one of the challenges is that here, now that we don't have these live performances or live events, exhibitions, and so on, how do you get people to pay, even though they want to still consume art? Part of that whole process for him and for a lot of other artists, I've also spoken to people like Ruben Victor and so on from the Artist Coalition. And then we're very much looking at, how can you coalesce around some of these ideas and bring other artists together, so that sometimes where you've been depending on an event promoter or some other middle person, perhaps the new relationships or the key partners, yourselves or your cohorts, your peers. Anyway, so we've been looking at how do you target international markets where there might be more of an appetite for not just for the art, but for paying for the art. So we've had digitization, which has been a double-edged sword for a lot of artists, because it means that your art is more accessible, but it's easier for people to copy it or pirate it, but also because it's online, people just figure it should be free, or close to free, and so you have that challenge. But obviously for them, they've been looking at other aspects of the business model rather than just saying, okay, let's just produce more art, but how do we get new partners, new key partners? How do we create new revenue streams and even new channels for our art? We could go on and on, but there's just a couple of examples there.
Sounds good. The example with the sweets is quite interesting, because I know it's difficult, especially for Tobago, with that reliance on people coming into the island. And now you have companies like DHL offering logistics for shipping, worldwide. So that's a great example of pivoting. So we're having a very huge lag with your audio. So what we're gonna do right now is just I want you to share some insight into what to expect for the webinar before we close off. But I have one question here, and it has to do with monetary investment, right? So we're being asked, social media allows new businesses to emerge with little monetary investment. What financial considerations should businesses and their owners undertake for future changes to their business model? You want to take a stab at
But
that
again,
one?
sure. Again, good question. Yeah. One of the things that we've seen, one of the down, well, I mean, there are quite a lot of downsides, obviously, to the pandemic. But one of the things we've seen is that a lot of traditional lenders and even investors themselves, who you would think have a greater level of risk tolerance, are seeing, obviously, the current circumstances as posing a lot more risk to businesses, both startups and even existing businesses. So the challenge, obviously, is to convince a funding agency or an investor that despite the risk profile, you are actually able to be adaptive, be responsive, be nimble enough to be able to adjust and still continue, not just to trade, but actually to take advantage of opportunities. There's always opportunity in crisis, right? So that's number one. So you need to be able, and it's not just about having a great pitch and to be able to speak confidently about them, but also speak with a lot of detail about how you're going to adjust your business model accordingly, and as well as look at different scenarios, which leads me to the financial aspects of what you mentioned before, your business plan. So usually with your business plan, you're required to do cash flow projections at the very least, right? You might also do a profit and loss projection or pro forma statement. What you want to do is look at scenario planning. You look at scenarios and sensitivity analysis, which means you're looking at the what ifs. If customers were to just go totally online, what's going to be the outcome in terms of the financial performance of a business and the other financial aspects of that inputs to your financial projections. If the government makes this decision, or if the borders are opened, or whatever, so you have to look at all of the variables and come up with different projections for each of those scenarios that you come up with. Obviously, you can't cover every single combination and permutation, because this is not going to be feasible, not going to be possible even. But you're going to look at some that maybe a bit far out. You can look at a worst case scenario, best case, and average, where you think things might pan out. And it shows to a lender or investor that you actually have the savvy, and you're not just assuming that things are going to be more or less the same, or even that they're going to revert to how they were after the pandemic. You really have to be able to speak to that ability to look into the future, given a number of variables. I always talk about visualization, and I utilize the example of Brian Lara and Michael Jordan. When they were active athletes, they utilized a technique called visualization, where they were actually able to, in their minds, map out all of their different moves and plays that would happen in an upcoming game. And when you think about that, it boggles your mind, because there are so many other things that could happen in the fluidity of a game, in terms of where the ball goes and the movements and actions of the various your opposing players, even your own players on your team, right? In both sports. I mean, it's a lot to take in, a lot of process, and a lot to prepare for. But those athletes were able to successfully do that, and they were able to navigate all of those various possibilities and deal with them, and actually, to some extent, even able to also influence the outcomes by having anticipated what's going to happen, right? So they almost determine where the opposing partner is going to place fielders, who's going to come on a bowl at a particular point, at which end. I mean, the kinds of things that you would think you have zero control over. But I'm just citing that technique because it allows you to treat with a range of different variables over which you have ostensibly no control or little control, and actually to come up with a plan that is feasible and is viable and is workable, right? So in terms of the financial elements of it, yes, you can have you would ideally want to build some of that into your financial projections. You would then approach your lenders and say, listen, this is the scenario. Yes, we know, in a broad sense, there is greater risk and so on, but this is how we navigate these risks. This is how we navigate these different scenarios and happenstances. And I think that approach will actually serve you very well, rather than saying, you know what, it's no hope.
Yeah, we definitely need hope. Hope has to be the number one ingredient. All right, so let's close off with some insight into what to expect, because we have the registration link for your webinar next week. I believe it's Thursday. Correct me if I'm wrong. But we have an upcoming event where you're gonna look at tools that you can use to remodel your business. So you want to give us like a quick summary of what to expect and who should come to this event.
Right, so we're going to look at, I mentioned the tool, the business model canvas. We're going to use that as a tool, especially for pre-existing businesses, people who've been operating for a while now, you're already trading. How can you actually revisit your business model to optimize your performance? So we're going to look at that. We're also going to utilize a number of other examples. So I just use a couple of examples there. We even look at what larger businesses are doing, for example, in the aviation sector, where you have airlines, most aircraft are currently grounded, but you have airlines like Singapore Airlines converting their planes into pop-up restaurants, and you have Airlines and Air Canada and so on carrying more cargo than rather than passengers, so they've actually modified their planes and so on to be able to the large demand for cargo. And so we're going to look at some of these examples and apply them to the canvas so that everybody can relate to what exactly they are. We're going to also look for those of you who are at pre-start stage or early stage as a modification of your business model canvas, which is the lean canvas, which speaks to, drills down at, exactly what is the problem you're trying to solve, the solution you come up with, what is your unfair advantage, and so on. So we're going to look at these, and we're just not going to, it's not going to be academic in the sense that, we can talk about, jargon and terminology and so on, but we're going to really, as much as possible, relate them to participants' businesses and these circumstances in the here and now. What we find is that in Trinidad and Tobago, we are very unique. We are a unique country in so many ways, right? So that a lot of the textbook examples, case studies, and tools and so on don't quite apply here. So what we're going to do is kind of localize some of those concepts. So you are going to be able to not just understand, but apply them to your business, because we really want it to be a working session, but one way the takeaways are what you can actually apply in your business immediately and going forward. So we're going to have that deep dive into those concepts. We're going to make it interactive as we can possibly do, so that we have peer learning as well. So that's usually a facet of the approach that we would take, where it's not the presenter or the facilitator alone dispensing knowledge, but it's about that collective wisdom that we're going to harness and curate for everybody's benefit. We're going to look at that, and so it's not going to be academic, it's not going to be airy-fairy, it's not going to just be high level, but we're going to make it very practical and usable.
And just one last thing, who should attend this event?
Oh yeah. So if you're a business owner, and if you're an SME owner, this is the event for you, because some businesses are thriving. As we can see, people in the grocery trade, people in delivery services, people in the digital marketing and digitization and so on, because obviously those are the obvious ones. They are thriving, they're doing well. But even if you're in those sectors and you want to maximize, you want to fully optimize your business, this is something you should look at, because as we've said over the past 45 minutes, we are in a state of flux. Things are changing and things can change rapidly. You have businesses like, there's a famous example of Kodak, where they actually invented the technology behind digital cameras, but didn't realize that was going to be the future, and they just shelved it, and obviously Kodak is no longer forced in that arena. So what we're going to do is, as I say, make it applicable to existing SME owners, but also people who are thinking about getting into entrepreneurship. There are some people who have been entrepreneurial and they've just been sitting on ideas and so on, and maybe they're seeing the opportunities now. Or some people have lost their jobs. Unfortunately, we've had a number of redundancies and closures of businesses and so on. And a number of people who had relative security of a job and now looking at how they can actually start a business and generate capital. I've encountered quite a few people who were working in nice cushy jobs, but they always had a side business going on. So they were moonlighting with their businesses, and we work with people like that as well for the upcoming webinar, because they would now be able to scale up the business and make it something that's really viable on its own, right? So they can earn a livelihood. So the whole spans the gamut. People are existing small, medium, or even micro business owners. If you're thinking of getting into entrepreneurship, and you need some guidance before you launch, because as I mentioned earlier on, you can actually save a lot of time, money, and grief if you do things right and you take a lean approach to getting started, especially in these here times. And so those are the key people, and people just thinking about it, so we get some good ideas. I mean, we're going to do a bit of brainstorming as well, right? So as I said, for the next workshop, we're going to look more at the how to do it and the what to do and so on. Today we were really looking at why you need to do it, so that you survive, you thrive. Because I mean, if we look at, as I said, taking a page from biology, the idea of survival, fittest, and so on, it might not be as stark as that, but the reality is that you need to adapt or you're going to struggle.
Well, thank you so much for that, Ashley. It has been quite an informative session, and I am now going to insert remodel into my vernacular a little bit differently now. I learned a lot in this session, and as any small business owner out there, I suggest you definitely try to get yourself registered for this webinar. As I said before, best price, it's in the comments below. Thanks once again, Ashley. So I'm just going to close off this session and remind everybody this is the Straight Off the Bat series, a show that covers the need to revive, survive, and adapt to the new normal of COVID-19. This series is ongoing, and we will be speaking to individuals to help you understand financial literacy and education. I have so many questions about money as an entrepreneur as well as a consumer, and I hope that you're able to join us to learn more. Don't forget to head over to batt.org.tt. That's BATT, as in Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago.org.tt, and make sure to register for the events. The link is in the comments. And if you joined this session late, don't worry, we will be ending it now, and then you can just click replay and stick around. Make sure to follow the Bankers Association of Trinidad and Tobago's Facebook page to be notified the next time we go live. So I hope you have a great afternoon. Morning. Why am I fast forwarding the day? And I'll see you next time at the next session. Bye, guys.